Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Fahmi Setyoko. My study number is 8320200100 and I'm from group 8. In this occasion, I would like to explain about the challenging the state, Marxist position and conclusion. First, about challenging the state. What all theorists mentioned earlier have in common is that they assume the existence of the state is more or less inevitable, eventually often referred to as a radical in concern to reclaim education from the state, does not question the underlying values of the liberal state, nor does he see the state framework itself as problematic. He simply does not believe that it is not the most efficient way to deliver education. In fact, most contemporary political theorists assume that the nation-state, in some form or another, is here to stay. Some, notably Robert Nozick, have offered a theoretical defense of the argument that the state is, the very least, a necessary evil. However, there is a long tradition of radical criticism of state education motivated by vision of society without the state. In the early 18th century, before state education was established, anarchist thinkers were arguing against its very idea. The Project of National Education, wrote by William Godwin in 1973, ought uniformly to be discouraged on account of its obvious alliance with national government. Blah blah blah. Before we put so powerful a machine under the direction of so ambitious an agent, it behoves us to consider well what it is that we do. Government will not fail to employ it to strengthen its hand and perpetuate its institution. It was later developed by 19th century social anarchist thinkers, although it is problematic to offer an exhaustive definition of anarchism as a political ideology. But crucially, they object to the state as a model of political organization and are suspicious of all hierarchies, promoting instead a model of decentralized, self-governing society. While anarchist thinkers share Mill's objection to imposing a single model of education of children, unlike Mill, they did not believe that autonomous individuals could flourish within the framework of the liberal state, as they saw the very structure and institution of the state as unequivocal to authentic human freedom. Their critiques center on the capitalist, free market state system, which they regarded as a perpetuating structural inequalities and hierarchical relationship between people. On the anarchist view, the school should be a microcosm of alternative society, demonstrating non-hierarchical relationship based on mutual aid and individual freedom. While anarchist educators share some of the pedagogical principles developed by libertarian thinkers, they were not motivated by a belief in individual freedom per se, but by a vision of a free, just an equal society. Thus, also they often advocate non-coercive pedagogy. They did not believe, as Neil did, that moral or political neutrality in education was either possible or desirable, and they promoted explicit moral and political values through their curriculum and school ethos. Many anarchist activities set up anarchist schools that were often part of self-governing experimental communities. Such schools taught children about internationalism and pacifism, promoted the values of solidarity and mutual aid, and rejected all nationalistic, militaristic, and religious messages. Anarchist educators were not just rejecting state control of education and asserting the rights of the individual to make educational choices, but were actively promoting a positive model of an alternative kind of society without the state. Early Marxist thinkers shared many of the social anarchist suspicions of state education. However, their objection was not a capitalist state that they argue would inevitably reproduce its own structural inequalities. For Marx, the economy, defined as the mode and relation of production, is the base of society and the corresponding social and political arrangements are the spur structure. The general condition of life and social, political, and intellectual life and consciousness are determined by the basic structure of society. So the only way to change human consciousness is to change this structure. There are various versions of reproduction theory or correspondence theory. Some argue that state schooling is the mechanism by which the bourgeois ensures the production of future generation of workers by training children in the skills and attributes of the working class, thus preserving the economic status quo. Other theorists have developed the idea that the cultural background and aptitudes of middle-class pupils are rewarded by the schools and translated into cultural capital, which translates, in turn, more powerful socioeconomic positions, while the capacities and cultural attributes of working-class children are not recognized as part of official school knowledge. Later Marxist theories offer an important supplement into this rather depressing view, that the school inevitably reproduces socio-economic inequalities by developing theories of resistance, notably the idea and practice of critical pedagogy, that could lead critical consciousness and subvert the structures and knowledge of the oppressive system. Another tradition that offers a radical challenge to the model of state schooling is that of deschooling. This position was first articulated by Ivan Illich, who in Deschooling Society in 1970 argued that it is not education per se which is problematic, but the institutionalization of education which is similar to the institutionalization of other social functions. Healthcare, care for elderly, childbirth, and had created a dependency on institutions. The modern industrialized state, in this view, has become a school society, obsessed with certification, selection, social control, and the ritualization of progress. The only way, Illich argues, to recover a genuinely educational alternative is through the establishment of learning networks based on spontaneous, voluntary collaboration. Okay, and the last is conclusion. First, taking a broad historical perspective on question about state education forces us to ask not just what are aims of education in the liberal state and what are the rights and duties of the state, parents and children, but also to pose for more radical question about the very framework of the state, its underlying values and their justification. Second, this chapter shows that thinking about such issues suggests that the question of what our society should be like overlaps with the question of what education should be, that the two cannot be wisely separated. By White, 1982, page 1. And the last, there is an important tradition of schools and other educational experiments that have excited and continue to exist outside state control. Some of these like Summerhill, focus on individual freedom. Others, like anarchist schools, seek to challenge the very framework of the state as a form of political organization. Considering some radical alternatives can remind us that our thinking about education does not need to be constricted by the familiar frameworks of our existing political system. And I think that's all from me. Thank you for watching this video. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.